Innovation is key to effective and successful management. Organizational innovation is the successful implementation of creative ideas in organizations. We can only guess what changes technological innovations will bring in the next 20 years. Will we carry computers in our pockets? Today's smartphones are a step in that direction. Will solar power and wind power get cheap and efficient enough so that your home can have standalone power sources off the main electrical grid? Will fully automated, self-driving cars chauffeur you working in the back seat on a computing tablet via high-speed internet off to work? Who knows? The only thing we do know about the next 20 years is that innovation will continue to change our lives. A technology cycle begins with the birth of a new technology and ends when that technology reaches its limits or dies and is replaced by a newer, substantially better technology. Technology cycles occurred when air conditioners supplanted fans, when Henry Ford's Model T replaced horse-drawn carriages, and when planes replaced trains as means of cross-country travel, and so on. From the invention of the printing press to the rapid advance of the internet, studies of hundreds of technological innovations have shown that nearly all technology cycles follow the typical S-curve pattern of innovation shown here. Early in a technology cycle, there's still much to learn, so progress is slow as depicted by the first point in the S-curve. The flat slope indicates that increased effort in terms of money or research and development brings only small improvements in technological performance. Fortunately, as new technology matures, researchers figure out how to get better performance from it. This is represented by point B in the S-curve. The steeper slope indicates that small amounts of effort will result in significant increases to performance. After technology has reached its limits at the top of the S-curve, significant improvements in performance usually come from radical new designs or new performance-enhancing materials. Eventually, however, the new technology will replace the old technology. What then happens is the old technology cycle will be complete and a new one will have started. Technological innovation, however, can enable competitors to duplicate the benefits obtained from a company's distinctive competitive advantage. It can also quickly turn a company's competitive advantage into a competitive disadvantage. Companies that want to sustain a competitive advantage must understand and protect themselves from the strategic threats of innovation. Over the long run, the best way for a company to do this is to create a stream of its own innovative ideas and products year after year. Consequently, we define innovation streams as patterns of innovation over time that can create sustainable competitive advantage. An innovation stream begins with a technological discontinuity in which a scientific advance or unique combination of existing technology creates a significant breakthrough in performance or function. Technological discontinuities are followed by a discontinuous change, which is characterized by technological substitution and design competition. Technological substitution occurs when customers purchase new technologies or replace older technologies. Discontinuous change is also characterized by design competition, in which the old technology and several new technologies compete to establish a new technological standard or dominant design. Discontinuous change is followed by an emergence of a dominant design, which becomes a new accepted market standard for technology. Dominant designs emerge in several ways. One is critical mass, meaning that a particular technology can become the dominant design simply because most people use it. No matter how it happens, the emergence of a dominant design is a key event in the innovation stream. First, the emergence of a dominant design indicates that there are winners and losers. Technological innovation is both competence enhancing and competence destroying. Companies that bet on the now dominant design usually prosper. By contrast, when companies bet on the wrong design or the old technology, they may experience technological lockout, which occurs when a new dominant design prevents a company from competitively selling its products. Second, the emergence of a dominant design signals a shift from design experimentation and competition to incremental change, a phase in which companies innovate by lowering the cost and improving the functioning and performance of the dominant design. This focus on improving the dominant design continues until the next technological discontinuity occurs. Well, when we say that innovation begins with great ideas, we're actually saying that innovation begins with creativity. Creative work environments are workplace cultures in which workers perceive that new ideas are welcomed, valued, and encouraged. As this exhibit shows, creative work environments have 6 components that encourage creativity: challenging work, organizational encouragement, supervisory encouragement, work group encouragement, freedom, and a lack of organizational impediments. These elements create work environments that are creative. Work is challenging when it requires effort, demands attention and focus, and is perceived as important to others in the organization. Flow is a psychological state of effortlessness in which you become completely absorbed in what you're doing and time seems to fly by. Removing distractions assists in creating a work environment conducive to flow. Another key part of creating flow experiences, and thus creative work environments, is to achieve a balance between skill and task challenge. Workers become bored when they can do more than's required of them, or they become anxious when their skills aren't sufficient to accomplish a task. When skills or task challenges are balanced, however, flow and creativity can occur. A creative work environment requires 3 kinds of encouragement: organizational, supervisory, and work group. Organizational encouragement of creativity occurs when management encourages risk-taking and new ideas, supports and fairly evaluates new ideas, rewards and recognizes creativity, and encourages the sharing of new ideas. Supervisory encouragement of creativity occurs when supervisors provide clear goals, encourage open interaction with subordinates, and actively support development teams' work and ideas. Work group encouragement occurs when group members have diverse expertise and experience, education and backgrounds, and the group fosters mutual openness of ideas, positive, constructive challenge to ideas, and shared commitment to ideas. Freedom means having autonomy over one's day-to-day work and a sense of ownership and control of one's ideas. Numerous studies have indicated that creative ideas thrive under conditions of freedom. To foster creativity, companies may have to remove impediments to creativity from their work environments. Internal conflict and power struggles, rigid management structures, and a conservative bias towards the status quo can all discourage creativity. They create the perception that others in the organization will decide which ideas are acceptable and deserve support. The experiential approach to innovation assumes that innovation is occurring within a highly uncertain environment, and that the key to fast product innovation is to use intuition, flexible options, and hands-on experience to reduce uncertainty and accelerate learning and understanding. The experiential approach to innovation has 5 aspects: design iterations, testing, milestones, multifunction teams, and powerful leaders. An iteration is a repetition. So a design iteration is a cycle of repetition in which a company tests a prototype of a new product or service, improves on the design, and then builds and tests the improved product or service prototype. A product prototype is a full-scale, working model that's being tested for design, function, and reliability. Testing is a systematic comparison of different product designs or design iterations. Companies that want to create a new dominant design following a technological discovery quickly build, test, and improve product prototypes. By trying a number of very different designs or making successive improvements and changes in the same design, frequent design iterations reduce uncertainty and improve understanding. Simply put, the more prototypes you build, the more likely you are to learn what works and what doesn't. Milestones are formal project review points used to assess progress and performance. Multifunctional teams are work teams composed of people from different departments. Multifunctional teams accelerate learning and understanding by mixing and integrating technical, marketing, and manufacturing activities. By involving all the key departments in development from the start, multifunctional teams speed innovation through early identification of new ideas or problems that would typically have gone unidentified or addressed until much later. Powerful leaders provide the vision, discipline, and motivation to keep the innovation process focused, on time, and on target. Powerful leaders are able to get resources when they're needed, are typically more experienced, have high status in the company, and are held directly responsible for the product's success or failure. On average, product leaders can get innovation-related projects done 9 months faster than leaders with little power or influence. Whereas the experiential approach is used to manage innovation in highly uncertain environments during periods of discontinuous change, the compression approach is used to manage innovation in more certain environments during periods of incremental change. Whereas the goals of the experiential approach are significant improvements in performance and the establishment of new dominant design, the goals of the compression approach are lower costs and incremental improvements in the performance and function of the existing dominant design. In short, a compression approach to innovation assumes innovation is a predictable process, that incremental innovation can be planned using a series of steps, and that compressing the time it takes to complete those steps can speed up innovation. The compression approach to innovation has 5 aspects: planning, supplier involvement, shortening the time of individual steps, overlapping steps, and multifunctional teams. Generational change occurs when incremental improvements are made to a dominant technological design, such as the improved version of a technology being fully backward compatible with an older version. In a sequential design process, each step must be completed before the next step begins, but sometimes multiple development steps can be performed at the same time. Overlapping steps shorten the development process by reducing delays or waiting time between steps. Organizational decline occurs when companies don't anticipate, recognize, neutralize, or adapt to the internal or external pressures that threaten their survival. Eventually, these companies realize their error of not focusing enough on the new thing, and then the company fights desperately and hopelessly to recover. Companies rarely die from moving too fast, and they frequently die from moving too slow. In other words, decline occurs when organizations don't recognize the need for change. There are 5 stages of organizational decline: blinded, inaction, faulty action, crisis, and disillusion. In the blinded stage, decline begins because key managers fail to recognize the internal or external changes that will harm their organizations. This blindness may be due to a simple lack of awareness about changes or an inability to understand their significance. It can also come from overconfidence that can develop when a company has been successful. In the inaction stage, an organizational performance problems become more visible. Management may recognize the need to change but still take no action. The managers may be waiting to see if the problems will correct themselves, or they might find it difficult to change the practices and policies they previously led to success. Possibly, too, they wrongly assume that they can easily correct the problems, so they don't feel the situation is urgent. In the faulty action stage, faced with rising costs and declining profits and market share, management will announce belt-tightening plans designed to cut costs, increase efficiency, and restore profits. In other words, rather than recognizing the need for fundamental changes, managers assume that they will just run a tighter ship. Company performance will return to previous levels. In the crisis stage, bankruptcy or dissolution, breaking up the company or selling its parts, is likely to occur unless the company completely reorganizes the way it does business. At this point, however, companies typically lack the resources to fully change how they run their businesses. Cutbacks and layoffs will have reduced the level of talent among employees. Furthermore, talented managers who were savvy enough to see the crisis coming will have found jobs in other companies, often with competitors. In the disillusion stage, after failing to make the changes needed to sustain the organization, the company is dissolved through bankruptcy proceedings or by selling assets to pay suppliers, banks, and creditors. At this point, a new CEO may be brought in to oversee the closing of stores, offices, and manufacturing facilities, the final layoff of managers and employees, and the sale of assets. It is important to note that the decline is reversible at each of the 4 stages, and that not all companies in decline reach final dissolution. Change forces lead to differences in form, quality, or condition of an organization over time. In contrast to change forces, resistance forces support the status quo, that is, the existing conditions in an organization. Change is difficult under any circumstances. Resistance to change is caused by self-interest, misunderstanding and distrust, and general intolerance for change. People resist change out of self-interest because they fear that change will cost or deprive them of something they value. Resistance might stem from a fear that the changes will result in a loss of pay, power, responsibility, or even perhaps one's job. People also resist change because of misunderstanding and distrust. They don't understand the change or the reasons for it, or they distrust the people, typically management, behind the change. Resistance isn't always visible at first. In fact, some of the strongest resistors may initially support the changes in public, nodding and smiling their agreement, but then ignore the changes in private or do their jobs as if they always have. Resistance may also come from a generally low tolerance for change. Some people are simply less capable of handling change than others. People with a low tolerance for change feel threatened by uncertainty associated with change and worry that they won't be able to learn from new skills or behaviors needed to successfully navigate change in their organizations. Because resistance to change is inevitable, successful change efforts require careful management. According to psychologist Kurt Lewin, managing organizational change is a basic process of unfreezing, change intervention, and refreezing. Unfreezing is getting people affected by change to believe that the change is needed. During the change intervention itself, workers and managers change their behavior to work practices. Refreezing is supporting and reinforcing the new changes so they stick. Resistance to change is an example of frozen behavior. Given the choice between changing and not changing, most people would rather not change. Because resistance to change is natural and inevitable, managers need to unfreeze resistance to change to create successful change programs. The following methods can be used to manage resistance to change: education and communication, participation, negotiation, top management support, and coercion. When resistance to change is based on insufficient, incorrect, or misleading information, managers should educate employees about the need for change and communicate change-related information to them. Managers must also supply the information, funding, and other support employees need to make changes. Another way to reduce resistance to change is to have those affected by the change participate in planning and implementing the change process. Employees who participate have a better understanding of the change and the need for it. Furthermore, employee concerns about change can be addressed as they occur if employees participate in the planning and implementation process. Finally, resistance to change can be managed through coercion or the use of formal power and authority to force others to change. Because of the intense negative reactions it can create, coercion should be used only when a crisis exists or when other attempts to reduce resistance to change have failed. Managers commonly make predictable errors when they lead change. The first 2 errors occur during the unfreezing phase, when managers try to get the people affected by change to believe that change is really needed. The first and potentially most serious error is not establishing a great enough sense of urgency. In fact, Cotter estimates that more than half of all change efforts fail because the people affected are not convinced that the change is necessary. People will feel a greater sense of urgency if a leader in the company makes a public, candid assessment of the company's problems and weaknesses. The second mistake that occurs in the unfreezing process is not creating a powerful enough coalition. Change often starts with 1 or 2 people, but change has to be supported by a critical and growing group of people to build enough momentum to change an entire department, division, or company. The next four errors that managers make occur during the change process, when a change intervention is used to try to get workers and managers to change their behavior and work practices. Lacking a vision for change is a significant error at this point. A vision for change makes clear where a company or department is headed and why the change is occurring. Change efforts that lack vision tend to be confused, chaotic, and contradictory. By contrast, change efforts guided by visions are clear, are easy to understand, and can be effectively explained in 5 minutes or less. Undercommunicating the vision is another mistake in the change process. Successful communication of the vision requires that top managers link everything the company does to the new vision so that they walk the talk by behaving in ways consistent with the vision. Furthermore, even companies that begin change with a clear vision sometimes make the mistake of not removing obstacles to that new vision. They leave formidable barriers to change in place by failing to redesign jobs, pay plans, and technology to support the new way of doing things. Another error in the change phase is not systematically planning for and creating short-term wins. Most people don't have the discipline and patience to wait 2 years to see if a new change effort works. Change is threatening and uncomfortable, so people need to see an immediate payoff if they're to continue to support it. Cotter recommends that managers create short-term wins by actively picking people and projects that are likely to work extremely well and early in the change process. The last two errors that managers make occur during the refreezing phase, when attempts are made to support and reinforce changes so that they stick. Declaring victory too soon is a tempting mistake in the refreezing phase. Managers typically declare victory right after the first large-scale success in the change process. Declaring success too early has the same effect as draining the gasoline out of a car. It stops change efforts dead in its tracks. When success is declared, supporters of the change process stop pushing to make change happen. After all, why push when success has been achieved? The last mistake that managers make is not anchoring changes in the corporation's culture. An organizational culture is the key set of values, beliefs, and attitudes shared by organization members that determine the accepted way of doing things in the company. Changing cultures is extremely difficult and slow. According to Cotter, two things help anchor changes in a corporation's culture. The first is directly showing people that changes have actually improved performance. The second is to make sure that the people who get promoted fit the culture. If they don't, it's a clear sign that the changes were only temporary. One of the reasons that organizational change efforts fail is that they're activity-oriented rather than results-oriented. In other words, they focus primarily on changing company procedures, management philosophy, or employee behavior. Typically, there's much build-up and preparation as consultants are brought in, presentations are made, books are read, and employees and managers are trained. There's a tremendous emphasis on doing things the new way, but with all the focus on doing, almost no attention is paid to the results, to seeing if all the activity has actually made a difference. By contrast, results-driven change supplants the emphasis on activity with a laser-like focus on quickly measuring and improving results. Another advantage of results-driven change is that managers introduce changes in procedures, philosophy, or behavior only if they're likely to improve measured performance. In other words, managers and workers actually test to see if changes make a difference. A third advantage of results-driven change is that quick, visible improvements motivate employees to continue to make additional changes to improve measured performance. Organizational development is a philosophy and collection of planned change interventions designed to improve an organization's long-term health and performance. Organizational development takes a long-range approach to change, assumes that top management supports is necessary for change to succeed, creates change by educating workers and managers to change ideas, beliefs, and behaviors so that problems can be solved in new ways, and emphasizes employee participation in diagnosing, solving, and evaluating problems. Organizational development interventions are aimed at changing large systems, small groups, or people.